Dustin, and thank you for coming to our YouTube channel today. On today's episode of Fix It, Fab It, or Upgrade It, we're going to talk about some tech tips on how to get more power and performance out of your engine without adding additional cost to your overhaul. So here we have a set of Ford Windsor heads. They're off a 351 from the late 80s. They're in a custom-built jet boat, and last season it was having some head gasket failure problems. So at this point we've torn down the block, but on this segment we're going to touch on how to get power and performance out of your heads with adding no additional cost. So that just means we're going to put in a little elbow grease on this one. We're going to show you how to do it. So we've got the heads all torn down, soda blasted them, everything's pulled apart, and we've discovered that there's a catastrophic crack on one of the valve seats that bridges across completely to both sides. So at this point, we know that this head is in fact bad. We do need to replace that. Lucky for us, we went down to the local machine shop, and he knew a guy who knew a guy, and now we have a replacement head. When you replace these heads, it's important that you look at the casting on the bottoms, and in this case, these are D80E heads, and it's important that you replace like for like. That way they're going to have the same size valves, same combustion chambers, the flow passages are going to be pretty much the same. We're going to port these heads, and by that we're going to remove this extra material that also has these sharp edges. As you can see, I've overlaid our exhaust gasket to show how much extra material there is on these heads, and that restricts the flow of the exhaust gases and also on the intake side. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to put a bit on our die grinder that's going to hog out some of this material on each of these ports, and also any boogers that are inside left over from the castings. Another thing we're going to do is we're going to come inside from where the valves sit, and we're going to knock all these sharp edges off inside, so that way the air is less restricted on its way in. You have to be careful not to go too thin, because if you go too thin and remove too much material, you'll actually create hot spots in your head, which are very bad. You don't want to do that. Primarily, you're just trying to improve airflow. And also an important thing to note is that when you're doing this on the intake valve, you do not want to have a finished product that is smooth or polished. It helps to have a rough surface. So in this case, on the intake side, we're going to be using a sanding flap wheel. The reason you don't want it to be completely smooth or appear polished is because the way the fuel and the air atomize before going into the cylinder, in this portion, I'm going to teach you guys about indexing spark plugs, why we do it and how we do it. So if you look at this, a traditional spark plug, you can see here that when it makes its spark, it projects it outward away from the tip. Now, the point is you want to have the spark projected towards the intake valve. Typically, you can index a spark plug by shimming it with a copper washer, or each spark plug's threaded just a little bit different. And if you try it in multiple holes, eventually you'll probably find one that it fits in quite well. So for example, we'll thread it into this one here. And if you notice that once it's installed and tight, the spark is being projected right back into the head. That's the worst possible place you could have it. So, you know that this is not a good one to thread this one into. And then you try it in a different one. Same spark plug. Threads are cut just a tiny bit different. And you can see here that it's projecting its spark outward towards the intake valve. That's the exact way you'd want it. So this one, I would consider it to be indexed correctly. Now, this gets a lot more difficult if the head's already bolted down onto the block. And in that case, what you can do is you can take and you can actually mark your spark plug with like a Sharpie or something to give yourself an indication of where it's at on the plug itself. So that way you know when the head is flipped over that you want it to point this direction towards your intake valve when you're finished. In summary, today we learned how to port, gasket match, and index spark plugs. If you found this video informative or helpful, please like and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.